What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. All right, so this is a requested video from one of my subscribers. They wanted me to do like a comparison between the 2011 Dallas Mavericks and the 2014 San Antonio Spurs. Now, a lot of times they say who would win, and all of that is subjective. If you're talking about any particular one game, quite honestly, almost any NBA team can beat a team on any given night. I guess a better testament would be who will win in a series. But even then, things can happen. Injuries, hot streaks, cold streaks, unforeseen matchup advantages. Although usually you can kind of tell who's going to have an advantage. So look, you have the 2011 Dallas Mavericks, who went on what was seen initially as an improbable run. That team had one of the deepest supporting casts, one of the best supporting casts of all time, accompanying a rejuvenated and determined Dirk Nowitzki. Dirk, during those playoffs, averaged 27.7 points, 8.1 rebounds, 2.5 assists on 48.5% shooting, and 46% from three-point range, 94% from the free throw line. I mean, Dirk had one of the great offensive runs of all time. But he also, his team had Jason Kidd, who was 37 years old. But, he still had a lot left in the tank during that postseason. He averaged 9 points, over 7 assists, almost 2 steals, and shot 37% from downtown. Sean Marion, the Matrix, was on this team. Now more of a supporting player, but during that playoffs, 12 points, 6 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 steal, nearly 1 block. 47% shooting. Jason Terry had some monster games for them. He was their second leading scorer, 17.5 points, 3 assists, 1 steal, 48% from the floor, 44% from downtown, 84% from the line. Tyson Chandler, who I think the year before that won Defensive Player of the Year, definitely reached his potential after a not so impressive start with the Chicago Baby Bulls. 8 points, 9 rebounds, 1 block, 58% shooting, back when that really meant something. J.J. Barea made a career out of that playoff run. A contract, I should say. Peja Siakovic playing the final games of his NBA career. 7 points per game off the bench, 38% shooting from downtown in the playoffs. Deshaun Stevenson was on this team as well. Brendan Haywood. And I think Caron Butler played with his team, but he got hurt during the regular season. Yeah, he did. And like I said, they had one of the deeper teams in NBA history. And I forgot Brian Cardinal played for them during the regular season. On the other side, you have the San Antonio Spurs, who had an NBA record 10 international players on that particular roster, which was a precursor to the eventual dominance of international players in the NBA. I mean, hell, we haven't had an American-born league MVP since James Harden, 2017, 2018. This team featured the ageless Tim Duncan, Kawhi Leonard, the year that he made his NBA real debut. Well, he was in the NBA before that, but this is when he truly made his come-out party, that finals. Tony Parker, Boris Diaw, Manu Ginobili, Danny Green, who had such a tremendous finals that year. Tiago Splitter, Marco Bellinelli, Patty Mills, and Matt Bonner were on this team. Now, if you look at the tail of the tape, Dallas in their respective season went 57-25, which was second in the Southwest Division. The Spurs went 62-20, which was first in that Southwest Division. Most of these numbers are going to favor the San Antonio Spurs a little bit because as the rule changes began to favor offensive players more the game began to change. The spacing got better. The game focused more on shooting and three-point shooting. So that helps the Spurs out a little bit in the matchup. But some of it was the Spurs just had a little bit more punch overall. You know what I'm saying? Dallas was, in my opinion, an overachieving defensive team, not because they were so overpowering with defense and shot blocking and pressure. It was more, it was effort. It was a bunch of guys who were like, man, this probably will be our last chance to win a title. We got to go all out, play team basketball. We got to go all out and be as one out here. So egos were set aside. And on defense, they were communicating. You know what I'm saying? They had their heads on a swivel. You know, they knew that they were playing one of the great teams of recent memory in the Miami Heat. And they were motivated by disrespect by the Miami Heat. Let's be honest. Remember? You know what I'm saying? They were making fun of Dirk having a cold and whatnot, being young and arrogant. You know, another motivating factor, about 4 years before that, Dirk Nowitzki won the MVP on a 67-win Mavericks team that I still, to this day, have no idea how they won 67 games when you look at their roster. But they got embarrassed in the first round, beaten in 6 by the We Believe Warriors team, which predated the Steph Curry era Warriors. So, you know, Dirk had this reputation for being a guy that either choked in the playoffs or just didn't get it done. Remember back in 2003, if I remember correctly, Dallas was up 2-1 in that series against the Spurs when Dirk got hurt. And then the Spurs went on to go 3-1 after the injury. So there was always this expectation, look, man, Dirk, we're supposed to be this all-time great player, but you're not getting it done. So the Spurs were motivated by a heartbreaking Game 7 loss to the Miami Heat, which followed Ray Allen hitting one of the biggest shots in NBA Finals history, which saved them because had they not scored, Tim Duncan would probably have 6 rings instead of 5 rings. Let's look at this. Dallas averaged 100.2 points per game, which was 11 out of 30 teams. Spurs 105.4. The Dallas Mavericks gave up only 96 points per game, which was 10th out of 30 teams. Spurs 97.6, which was 6th. So that tells you scoring was going up by 2014. The Mavericks offensive rating 109.7. Spurs 110.5. The Mavericks defensive rating 105. The Spurs 102.4, which is very impressive considering that scoring was going up. The Mavericks shot 47.5%, Spurs 48.6%. Dallas shot 36.5% from beyond the arc. The Spurs were the best in the NBA at 39.7%, nearly 40% from beyond the arc. Both teams did not do a great job of getting to the foul line. Both were more jump shooting and perimeter teams at that point. Tim Duncan was not the initiator of the offense anymore. Both teams were great from the foul line, about 78% both. Both were not great offensive rebounding teams. Both were middling rebounding teams. Both were tremendous passing teams. Dallas 23.8, second in the NBA. Spurs 25.2, number 1. The edge goes to Spurs in steals, blocks, turnovers, and personal fouls. During their respective run, the 2011 Mavericks beat in the first round of Blazer team. They went 48-34. Then they beat the defending champion Lakers, who had the same record that they had the year before when they beat the Celtics in 7 in the finals. Then they beat a Thunder team that went 55-27 in the conference finals. That same Thunder team went to the NBA Finals the very next season. And then in the finals, they beat a Heat team that was 58-24 and was favored by most sports prognosticators to win the title. The Spurs, during their playoff run, beat a Mavericks team that was 49-33 that year. Then they beat a Blazers team that won 54 games, 54-28. Then a Thunder team that won 59 games in the conference finals. And then they beat the Heat, who were 54-28, a little bit beat up by injuries by that point. Wade, and especially Wade, was not quite the same player. You may recall they beat the Heat by what was then the largest margin of victory, 14 points per game in NBA history. Matter of fact, that Spurs team went 16-0 in the month of March in that season and had, I think, the fourth best record in San Antonio Spurs history. I tend to think this would be a great series. The one mismatch that would give Dallas a chance, obviously, would be Dirk Nowitzki. Dirk was a power forward, but Dirk was more of a jump shooter and had range, three-point range, obviously. Tim Duncan was a traditional big man. So, by this point, however, Tim was, even though he's listed as a power forward, Tim was generally playing center. So when you look at the San Antonio Spurs, really, to be honest with you, yeah, he's playing center then. So I think their starting power forward was Boris Diaw, right? Yeah, it was Boris Diaw, but he didn't start. So I'm trying to remember how their roster was. All right, so at that point in time, I think at times, I'm just looking at something. I think at times they may have had Kawhi Leonard at the power forward position, being that he was more known as a defensive player, probably playing stretch bigs, because Timmy was a center at that point, lost a lot of mobility, and the NBA was changing. So Kawhi Leonard often played at the four, although he's really a three. And we all know Kawhi Leonard, I believe, has a couple of Defensive Player of the Year awards. I know at least one. So that was an all-time great defensive team, collectively. I tend to think that San Antonio had a little bit too much firepower for Dallas overall. You know what I mean? There were 8 players that during that playoff run, I'm just talking about the playoff run. No, during the regular season, excuse me. There was 8 players during the regular season that shot above league average as far as three-point percentage. During the playoffs, you had Kawhi Leonard, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, Danny Green, Marco Bellinelli, Patty Mills, all shot well above league average from three-point percentage. As a matter of fact, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys shot above 40%. Danny Green, I think one of those games he tied an NBA record. Was it most three-pointers in a half? But anyway, both teams executed well. Both teams shot it well. But I tend to think that for their respective stages of their career, the Spurs had more guys as far as upside or in their primes. Kawhi Leonard was getting there. Tony Parker was still close to his prime. Ginobili wasn't quite in his prime, but he played a lot better in that finals than he did the year before, when he averaged a ton of turnovers and didn't shoot very well, didn't play very well. He redeemed himself in this final. So he was ageless in his play. Danny Green was in his prime. Before the heart problems, Thiago Splitter was in his prime. Bellinelli was very young. Patty Mills was young. They had a lot more youthful. They had youth mostly on their side, except for Tim Duncan. But Tim Duncan made adjustments. You know what I mean? As far as his role, unlike a guy today who refuses to accept that he's not the same player. But anyway, I give the edge to the Spurs now. As a matter of fact, you can make an argument. The Spurs could win that in 4, 5, or 6. You know, shooting means a lot, man. It does. I'm not saying Dallas didn't have shooters because they did, but at that point in time, you know, Stojakovic was kind of spotty. Jason Kidd, I mean, yeah, if he was top of the key, you know, in a fast break situation where there's no one really on him, he'll knock him down. We know Dirk, what he could do. Dirk would have to be, to me, Dirk would have to be like huge in this series. And Jason Terry. Jason Terry would have to average, in my opinion, like 22, 23. Dirk would have to average damn near 30 in order for Dallas to even have a shot at winning a series against this San Antonio Spurs team. Matter of fact, remember that Spurs team was so great that many people were floored by the arrival of the Warriors because people really anticipated that Spurs team was going to repeat. Remember, Tim Duncan's last year, that San Antonio Spurs team won 67 games. So, you know, it is what it is. I tend to just go with the San Antonio Spurs because they had the advantage as far as, you know, when you look at the different metrics, they have the advantage in everything. Everything that Dallas did great, with almost very few exceptions, the Spurs did even better. So I tend to go with San Antonio, I'll say in 5 or 6. But anyway, that's just my take on it. Tell me what you guys think. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention this. Great coaches. Greg Popovich, when he actually has a team around that wants to be coached and players that want to be coached. Greg Popovich for the Spurs. Rick Carlisle for the Mavericks. So great coaching, but Greg Popovich is one of the all-time great coaches. Rick Carlisle's great too, but Greg Popovich is one of the top, arguably 3 to 4 coaches of all time. So I give it to the Spurs, at least in 6, possibly 5. Tell me what you guys think.